dreams I had had, and everyone a red balloon. It's all over and I'm standing pretty in the dust that was a city. If I could find just to prove the world was here, and here it is, a red balloon. I think of you and let it go.
Changing Hola, buena tarde.
Hello, good evening. We are here for this first day of our BCNegra festival here in La Paloma. And as you can see, we still have writers signing books at the end of our room. We are going to move on now to a table that is going really to be very interesting. We still have Sandrone getting ready. Sandrone has brought some mystery to the table. We have really a very interesting table because we have three writers here who are really making a very noteworthy contribution. And the discussion will be moderated by Tony Turbe, who is a friend in the festival. He is also a journalist. And we would like to greet Pablo, Joe, and Sandrone to the stage. These are a very coup d'effet from the Italian writers. We are always fascinated by them. The name of our round table is the human factor. It has a lot to do with the novels of these three writers, and they refer to the determinism of where we are born and what we do. Let's enjoy this round table. Okay, hello, good evening. This panel, this dialogue has as a title, The Human Factor. When I was proposed this meeting, I thought that these were going to be three very different writers. And as I read their books, I realized that this was not really a supposition, that it was a reality. They are, in fact, very different writers, and they have different approaches to the thriller and to contemporary thriller novels. I would like to introduce, first of all, Pablo Maurette, who is professor of English literature and comparative literature in the Florida University. He has written several essays related to the human body. These essays are very narrative. They have great doses of sense of humor, and he started in the genre thriller with his novel The Golden Girl. We are going to talk about this novel today. Pablo Maurette, welcome. And I'd like to start asking you a first question. We are here in a dancing, in a ballroom. Pablo, what would you like to do? To dance or to look at those who are dancing? I prefer simply to stand at those who dance. Okay. We also have with us Joe Thomas, who is professor in London. He published a Polish novel called Band that goes from the 60s to the Second World War, and he is also the writer of the Quartet of Sao Paulo with Paradise City, Gringa, Playboy, and the new book in Spanish, Brazilian Psycho, that ends up with the Sao Paulo Quartet. Joe, I think we will have to welcome you again here in Barcelona, because in February we have assisted to the second novel of your new trilogy. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Joe.
Okay, Joe, welcome to our BCNegra festival. And I have a quick question for you. Compared to Sao Paulo, do you think that Barcelona is a bit boring?
Yo hablo portuñol. I think it probably won't do sufficient to say. I think Sao Paulo is a city that lacks Barcelona's charm. but it has size and it has power. And so does Barcelona, but you know, this is my third time here, and yeah, I'd like to spend more if that's possible. But I do think that in terms of fun and excitement, this is a city that I've enjoyed more than Sao Paulo. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Un poquito más tranquila, a little bit quieter. Y nos acompaña también.
We also have here Sandrone DAIZIERI, who was trained in San Pellegrino, where he was a cook chef when he decided to start cooking books and also screenplays for TV and in the thriller genre. He was the creator of a very famous detective, the Gorilla, who is a bit wild, but also lovely at the same time. And we have a couple who are Colomba Caselli and Dante Corra. And we have the whole trilogy that has been published in Spanish. But the book he is going to present today does not belong to this trilogy. He is here to present his new book, Don't Run Away. Welcome, Sandrone. And I'd like to ask you a very compromising question, but we are here amongst friends. You can be sincere. You have been a great cook. What about the restaurants here in Barcelona? Well, I have been to a Chinese restaurant. I couldn't really say.
Vamos a hacer una ronda de situación, ¿vale? Para situarnos brevemente en cada una de las novelas y para que os situéis un poquito. Contar los libros es un negocio que siempre es a pérdidas, porque es imposible contar en 20 segundos algo que ellos han estado meses o años escribiendo. Pero bueno, voy a intentar hacer una introducción y vosotros me ayudáis. La Niña de Oro, Pablo Maurette, nos cuenta, bueno, esa secretaria de la Fiscalía, Silvia Rey. Silvia Rey se quiere ir de vacaciones, pero no va a haber manera. En toda la novela nunca se podrá ir de vacaciones porque, bueno, porque en Buenos Aires es una ciudad donde se mata, y se mata mucho. Veremos que es una historia, es una novela muy laberinto. La Niña de Oro es el lugar donde ella, sobre todo, se reúne con su padre, donde comentan, donde, bueno, como el subinspector Carrucci, que es la parte policial, ella es la ayudante de la fiscal, es ese policía un poco chapado a la antigua, pero que al final es entrañable, Carrucci. La verdad es que, bueno, la verdad es que al final se hace querer. Bueno, es una novela donde suceden muchas cosas. Hay el asesinato de un profesor que recibe visitas a horas intempestivas, visitas, bueno, de esto que en la novela se llaman taxi boys, chicos que, bueno, levantan el taxímetro y otras cosas. Y al parecer un taxi boy albino, para más señas, asesinó al profesor. Pero Pablo ya desde el primer inicio ya siembra ciertas dudas en el lector. De hecho, nosotros sabemos incluso cosas tal vez que los policías, que los investigadores no saben, y al final es una novela muy laberíntica donde deriva ciertos sitios que yo no sé si él quiere que contemos, pero para eso está el autor, para decir hasta dónde explicar. Pero yo solo les voy a decir una cosa. En mi opinión, es una novela que nos habla de las incertidumbres, del azar e incluso de la soledad. Yo diría que es una novela donde los personajes están solos. El propio Carrucci está casado, pero su matrimonio es un matrimonio de cena recalentada y de alguna forma, ella también divorciada, de alguna forma es una novela donde en medio del ruido del Gran Buenos Aires percibes una gran soledad. No sé si tú estás de acuerdo, Pablo, en esto.
No lo había pensado así, pero tiene sentido. Si tengo que pensar el gran misterio de la novela, que es el misterio que me impulsó a escribirla, es el misterio del color. El misterio del color, que según, bueno, muchos que intentaron develarlo a lo largo de la historia, a través de la óptica o del estudio de de los sentidos en general, el sentido de la vista, es uno de los mayores misterios del ser humano. Cómo percibimos el color y cómo nos afectan los colores. Esto parece todo muy teórico, pero fue como el germen de una novela que está centrada en un personaje que es una especie de ballena blanca, que es un albino, un chico albino. Todo gira en torno a él, pero él es muy esquivo, casi no aparece, salvo en la imaginación de los demás, que lo buscan por toda la ciudad y lo que están buscando es un color. Y es un color que va cambiando en sus imaginaciones y que va mutando y que de pronto es más plateado y de pronto es más dorado. Ese fue el germen de la novela, esa pregunta, la pregunta por el misterio del color. Y el tema de la soledad es fundamental, sí, porque bueno, es el gran tema de la metrópolis, ¿no? de la cosmópolis como Buenos Aires, o de la necrópolis, porque la protagonista Silvia Rey vive justo enfrente de del cementerio más grande de Buenos Aires, que se llama La Chacarita, y le gusta decir que en vez de ser cosmopolita, ella es necropolita. Vive en ese mundo de muerte, tiene el cementerio frente a sí misma, y un día se da cuenta, viendo por la ventana, de que el cementerio tiene básicamente la misma forma que la capital federal, que la ciudad de Buenos Aires. Ustedes saben que Buenos Aires es la provincia, que es gigantesca, toda la Pampa, y es la ciudad también, tienen el mismo nombre. En España se confunde mucho a veces el término bonaerense. Bonaerense significa de la provincia, el habitante de la ciudad es el porteño. Pero bueno, la ciudad, es decir, de donde somos los porteños, tiene la misma forma que el cementerio. Y ella, bueno, es algo sobre lo que reflexiona bastante. Es un personaje muy reflexivo y en ese sentido muy solo también, como toda la gente que es muy reflexiva. La gente que piensa mucho siempre termina sintiéndose muy sola.
Pablo, un profesor de literatura comparada, ensayista prestigioso, ¿por qué demonios se mete a hacer una novela negra? ¿Qué buscabas y qué has encontrado?
Buscaba complacer a mi mamá. Esa es la verdad. Mi mamá es una gran lectora de novela policial y yo le dije, voy a escribir un policial, y me dijo, no te atrevas, es un género muy difícil, no sabes nada de novela policial, tenés que leer todas estas primero antes de... Y bueno, y las leí, y me dio una lista de novelas que leer y me las leí. Había leído mucho Sherlock Holmes en mi infancia, pero es cierto que no había leído mucho del género, y leí muchísimo, y me pareció el gran género a partir del siglo XIX, cuando nace como género, entre el siglo XX y el XXI, creo que es el gran género de la literatura contemporánea, el género policial. Me maravilló, y algunos de los mejores libros para mí del siglo XX son policiales. Las novelas de Chandler, las novelas de Patricia Highsmith. Entonces dije, bueno, voy a intentar. Y tenía una idea que tenía muchos años, de un misterio policial, pero también estaba intimidado por mi madre, todo muy psicoanalítico, muy argentino. Pero me atreví, en pandemia, tenía tiempo libre, dije, bueno, voy a intentarlo.
Un porteño muy ilustre, que era Jorge Luis Borges, decía que la novela policíaca no tenía el beneplácito de la crítica porque le faltaba el ingrediente, del aburrimiento, que los críticos siempre valoran tanto, ¿no? en la gran literatura, ¿no? Gracias, y luego profundizaremos un poco, y además, Pablo hace algo en la novela que no sé si nos lo querrá contar, un poco, que es la apertura. Antes hablaba del arco dramático, ¿no? Y cómo hay un momento dado en que pulveriza completamente la investigación, le da la vuelta como un calcetín, y al final nada es realmente lo que pensábamos que era, ¿no? Pero bueno, vamos a ir por partes. Nos acompaña también Joe Thomas. Él es británico, pero vivió 10 años en Sao Paulo, lo que le permite tener un conocimiento muy profundo de la ciudad desde dentro, pero también la ventaja de la mirada del que mira desde fuera. Por un lado, él viene de fuera, pero 10 años te dan una situación, digamos, de estar muy metido. Brazilian Psycho arranca fuerte, arranca con la muerte de una persona del colectivo LGTI atacada brutalmente en un parque por una banda a plena luz del día, una activista detenida por la policía militar a punto de ser violada por la propia policía militar en la comisaría. El asesinato, también un asesinato de un profesor, los profesores no están de suerte en vuestras novelas, un profesor de una escuela inglesa que además luego, bueno, descubriremos al final del libro que está basada en hechos reales. Bueno, las maniobras de una empresa financiera para penetrar en un barrio marginal, veremos a dos policías, uno novato, otro veterano, Leme y Lisboa. Pero sobre todo, creo, a mí lo que me ha llamado mucho la atención es que es un gran fresco social y político de lo que ha pasado en Sao Paulo y en Brasil en los últimos 5 o 6 años. Veremos el auge, bueno, primero veremos el auge, bueno, la llegada de la izquierda al poder, los errores también de la izquierda, y luego el auge de esa ultraderecha populista que se explica en la propia novela, afirma que va por odio de género, pero nos cuenta el narrador que en realidad los está fomentando. Joe, ¿crees que la novela negra es un buen vehículo para la crítica social?
Yeah, the novel sounds exhausting when you put it like that. But yeah, the crime form enables you to examine layers of society. Mm-hmm. When I lived in Sao Paulo and when I arrived there, I was interested in the inequality that existed, that was evident at every level, every turn, every time you queued for a bus or waited for a taxi or went to a restaurant. Sao Paulo was a kind of microcosm of the country, but also an enhanced and heightened one because of the amount of money and power that was there. And I taught in a school, a British school, international school, in that school there were Mick Jagger's son was at the school, for example. The mayor of Sao Paulo, the corrupt mayor of Sao Paulo, I taught his granddaughter. She was in my history class when she was called out to be told that her father and her grandfather had been arrested. So I thought, how do you tell the story of a place like this? How do you take the story, the anecdotes you've heard, the truths you've seen, and funnel them into a narrative that enables to understand or try to understand what's going on? That's why the book is long and complex. But the idea of the crime narrative, I think, is it enables you to take a detective who can go here and here, politicians, construction, the poor. And in Sao Paulo, it's such an evident thing. You can see the structures of power as you walk around or don't walk around the city, because if you have any money, you don't walk around the city. So from your taxi or your limousine or your helicopter. And what I wanted to do in the 4 books, but specifically this book, which starts the quartet and ends the quartet, was to say 2003, Lula is elected, a moment of hope. And how did a left-wing government, which produced so much good, and there's no doubt that I think that there was, also ended up veering into a kind of corruption to enable the rise of a right-wing government that, regardless of politics, has some horrible, horrible, tragic social consequences. And I think what I was trying to do in this novel particularly was to look at the different entry points to that. Who could represent that narrative? Which character? And then, of course, what can I have access to, and so forth. So it started off, it was going to be like a short book about a murder of a British school's headmaster, which was a real event that happened before I was there. And then I suddenly understood that the ramifications, the implications of all of that stretch much, much further. And I think it's important to say that the novel is political. Everything I do, and all 7 of my novels are political in the sense of attempting to examine structures of power. But at the same time, I'm not giving any answers. So, you know, that's maybe a problem. But the idea is to also, one of my novels last year was published in the UK, and a reviewer said it was a love letter to London, seething with outrage. And that's how I feel, actually. I love Sao Paulo, but I'm outraged by what happened. And I think what the crime narrative can do is to celebrate bits of society and critique and try to understand how a society is failing. And you know, when I first moved to Sao Paulo, the idea of South American corruption for an English person is almost quaint. It's a sort of haha stereotype. Of course, it's corrupt. And after spending time living there, I understood how it worked, and I realized what arrogance for someone from the UK with our government.
Yeah.
What the wonderful thing about living abroad, and the wonderful thing about trying to write about a place abroad, is you reflect as well on your own situation. And that's a sort of roundabout way of saying that the novel is a love letter to Sao Paulo, seething with outrage.
Es cierto que en su novela vemos muy claramente esas estructuras de poder, esas ramificaciones. Sao Paulo.
Yes, we see that in your novel, Sao Paulo, a place with very big inequalities, social and economic inequalities, the big skyscrapers, but also the marginalized neighborhoods where it is very dangerous to live. Joe, when we finish your book, when one finishes your book, we have the feeling that Sao Paulo is a city with many problems, very dangerous, very violent. But there was something for you that was very attractive in Sao Paulo, because you decided to stay 10 years there. What seduced you from Sao Paulo? Why didn't you run away to London right from the start?
It's a good question. I went to Sao Paulo for love. I met a woman, a Brazilian woman. That didn't work out. Here I am. But I think it's the excitement of the place. There's something about cities like Barcelona, like London, like Paris, New York, Sao Paulo, that have an energy, don't they? And despite everything, you want to be a part of that city. You know, for example, Brazil. I would never live anywhere, not even Rio. No, maybe there's cariocas here, but Sao Paulo has that energy that these cities have, and you feel like you're in the center of the world. You know what I mean? And I think that's the same of the great cities that we know in Europe, South America, North America. And also there's a peculiarity, because you see what happens, the darkness, but you're not necessarily in it. The idea of this whole book came in 2006. The World Cup was happening, and the drug gang, the PCC that run crime in Sao Paulo, they decided, they were all in prison, and they wanted flat screen televisions to watch the World Cup. So they demanded this of the prison authorities. And this is a long story short, the authorities said, no, you can't have your flat screen TVs. So over a weekend, Mother's Day weekend in 2006, this drug gang stopped Sao Paulo. They set fire up to buses, they attacked hospitals, police stations. The whole city came to a standstill. 150 people were killed. The police, the military police, and the drug gangs, they used it as an excuse to settle scores. I was teaching on the Friday, and something was happening. We said, just go home, go home. Everyone should go home, calm. And then for the 3 days, I stayed at home in my condominium, playing tennis and drinking cachaça. but not involved in this thing that was happening outside, but you knew it was going on. So there was this strange distance as well, you know. And one of the reasons why I wanted to write these novels was to think about that disconnect. How can you live in this condominium next door to a favela where people are being killed, and at the same weekend you're playing tennis? At the same time, of course, that enables you to enjoy the city in a way. But I think to answer that was an anecdote that helped spark the very first book that I wrote about Sao Paulo. But to answer your question, energy. It's that simple. Sorry.
Pues esta es la historia de Joe Thomas en su condominio.
That's the story of Joe Thomas in this great property. DAIZIERI tells us about a story from a very different approach and vision. His novel is a novel that you cannot turn down because you really get addicted to it. It tells us the story of a young girl that comes home, that really puts the key into the whole key, but she never gets to open it because someone kidnaps her, takes her to a van, and when the girl is awake, she realizes that someone has introduced a metallic cable through her body and that now she's hanged to a wall, although she has the possibility to walk around some meters in the room where she is imprisoned. We will see that the researcher is the girl's aunt. This researcher is this detective is also a lawyer, and she has a professional past, and she has some idea about her niece kidnapper. And Sandrone takes us to the past. We will also assist to the inquiry of this past, where someone was condemned to a life imprisonment, although this person was innocent. We will also learn about the investigator's story called Itala, a quite bizarre policewoman and detective. But in any case, we are constantly turning around the idea of who was this serial killer, why an innocent person was in prison, and what is around all this mystery, because many facts are really revolving around the main plot. And of course, I don't want to tell you too much about the plot of the novel. That's why we have Sandrone DAIZIERI today with us. He might explain what happens when the girl tries to communicate with the outer world. Sandrone likes very much thrillers, and in this sense, Sandrone, in your novel, there is plenty of action, a lot of lies, also some twisted truth, but some twisted, also morally twisted people. What is the reason that we find behind your novel? Because I see many twisted characters there.
Buonasera e grazie di avermi invitato in questo posto fantastico, in questo festival meraviglioso. Bel posto. Qual era l'idea dietro? Era un'idea da giallista inizialmente e un'idea da essere umano, diciamo così. Quella da giallista è volevo raccontare una storia in cui c'erano due indagini a distanza di 30 anni di tempo. Entrambe le indagini in qualche modo avevano un po' ragione e un po' torto e entrambe le indagini arrivavano a una fine e risolvevano il caso. Però era lo stesso caso che si ripresentava. Ma com'è possibile? Cosa avevano sbagliato nel passato? Che cosa stanno sbagliando nel presente? Quindi costruire questo. Come essere umano invece volevo riprendere uno dei temi che mi sono più cari. Che cos'è il male? Che è un grande tema, diciamo così, di tutti i giallisti. Che cos'è il male? Dove si origina? Chiaramente ci sono i grandi mali, ci sono i grandi mostri, sia della narrativa, della letteratura, della vita, insomma. Ma io cercavo un altro tipo di spiegazione, cercavo di capire perché nascesse il male che conoscevo, quello che avevo incontrato nella mia vita, quello che avevo vissuto magari di striscio o non troppo da vicino, oppure di cui avevo letto, di cui avevo visto magari le vittime, ho conosciuto gli effetti, o avevo visto i processi. E quindi il male, come posso dire, il male ordinario, il male normale, il male che può accadere. Ecco, io ho capito che una delle ragioni per cui il male avviene è per la mancanza di empatia delle persone. La mancanza di empatia significa dimenticarsi che le altre persone come noi soffrono, dimenticarsi che le altre persone sono come noi, anche se sono diverse magari di aspetto. E tutti quelli che se ne dimenticano, tutti quelli che fanno sì che altre persone soffrano quando potrebbero intervenire, persone che rinunciano magari al proprio dovere, come ha fatto l'avvocato che ritroviamo 30 anni dopo, che 30 anni prima ha lasciato condannare un innocente. Certo, ha fatto del suo meglio per salvarlo, ma quando questo innocente è stato condannato per essere il serial killer e lei sapeva che era innocente, semplicemente non ha fatto nulla. Anzi, si è portato questo peso, se n'è andata dall'Italia, ha cercato di dimenticare, ma non ha combattuto contro il sistema, diciamo così. Non ha detto no, quest'uomo è innocente, io mi immolo per salvarlo. Ha lasciato che finisse in carcere. E pensava che tutto sarebbe finito così, ma non è finito così, perché quando un innocente finisce in carcere vuol dire che c'è un colpevole ancora a piede libero. Vuol dire che c'è qualcuno che ha ucciso e che ancora potrebbe uccidere. E questa cosa lo capisce quando 30 anni dopo la vittima è proprio sua nipote. Sua nipote che viene rapita probabilmente dalla stessa persona che 30 anni prima aveva ucciso delle ragazze come sua nipote. E allora a questo punto capisce che non può più stare ferma, non può più rinunciare al suo dovere di essere umano, di avvocato, di zia, di parente, ma soprattutto di essere umano, e deve trovare la verità. Allo stesso tempo nel passato abbiamo questa poliziotta che si chiama Itala, che non a caso Itala, che vuol dire italiana in qualche modo, e che secondo me è l'incarnazione, non l'ho fatto apposta, ma è diventata così, è l'incarnazione diciamo così, delle caratteristiche positive e negative medie dell'italiano medio. Diciamo così, è estrosa, le piace risolvere le cose, allo stesso tempo le piace violare le regole, anche per il proprio interesse. Per esempio lei è sicuramente una poliziotta che fermerebbe di sicuro uno spacciatore o un assassino, ma allo stesso tempo quando incontra qualcuno che ha rubato magari un camion di merce, lo lascia andare, basta che gli dia un po' di merce. E questo fa sì che lei abbia costruito una piccola rete di poliziotti come lei, piccoli, poveri, e che diciamo così, arrotondano il loro stipendio rubando e in qualche modo venendo meno al loro dovere. Ecco, a un certo punto a questa donna viene chiesto di mandare in carcere un innocente. Perché? Perché qualcuno va mandato in carcere dopo che 3 ragazze sono state uccise. Perché forse è lui il colpevole, anche se non ci sono prove, almeno lei pensa così. E quindi Itala diventa parte di questa storia perché trova le prove per mandare in carcere una persona innocente, che poi verrà difeso dall'avvocato che sappiamo, e che risulta essere non il vero assassino. E quando Itala però si rende conto di aver superato il suo limite morale, ovvero va bene rubare, va bene imbrogliare, va bene nascondere le prove, va bene fare favori alle persone potenti, ma quando si rende conto che davvero c'è ancora un assassino in giro che uccide ragazze, non ce la fa a fermarsi e quindi mette a rischio la propria vita, il proprio lavoro, la propria esistenza, quella che ha costruito dal nulla, e poi scopriremo anche chi era, per trovare la verità, e la trova. Esattamente però non riesce a fermare il male che ormai si è generato da quello che è accaduto. E noi passando dal passato al presente vediamo queste 2 storie parallele e cerchiamo di capire ma chi è l'assassino vero? Quello che lei ha trovato, quello che non ha trovato, che cosa è successo? E come facciamo a salvare questa ragazza che rimane intrappolata in uno scantinato con una corda dentro la carne, perché è l'unico modo per essere sicuri che non apri nessun lucchetto. Potete immaginare, una catena la puoi scassinare, un lucchetto lo puoi aprire, ma una catena che è stata trapanata dentro il tuo osso della scapola non le puoi togliere. Puoi solo rimanere lì legata e muoversi dentro questa stanza che il suo rapitore le ha costruito, dove i fili dove come dei piccoli binari si mescolano lungo la parete che la costringono a muoversi molto lentamente, spesso sbaglia la strada. Anche questo è un modo per controllarla. Lei è controllata dal suo rapitore, ma il suo rapitore chi è? L'assassino di 30 anni prima o qualcun altro? Ecco, un'altra cosa che racconta questa storia è che forse il male si trasmette. Chi ha subito il male e ne è sopravvissuto, a volte si trasforma esso stesso in un agente, in un portatore di male. L'esempio più semplice è questo: pensate ai bambini picchiati che da adulti picchiano. Pensate alle persone che hanno subito delle violenze e che da adulti e che le fanno violenza sugli altri. Pensate ai soldati che tornano e uccidono. Ecco, tutte queste cose sono la sensazione che il male sia qualcosa di più di una scelta delle persone, ma sia una sorta di virus che si trasmette e che bisogna fermare all'inizio. Ecco, questa è un po' la storia di questo romanzo. Spero che la traduttrice simultanea...
That's the story of my novel. I hope that the interpreter made me brighter than I am and smarter than I am. In your original novel in Italy, you were talking about, yes, evil. You were talking here about evil. In your novels and in your novel, Pablo, we are talking about an investigator. We have a female investigator. We have Renata. We have Fernanda. How do you feel with your female characters? Because the commissioner in our festival has published an article saying that we have many female characters in our novels, but sometimes these women are simply women, like men in disguise. What's your relationship with these female characters? Sandrone, for example. I don't think so. Well, these are not my female characters. These are not men in disguise. I mean, well, I don't get identified with the other sex. It's not that either. But I like to explain stories around women that go outside the stereotypes. For example, in the thrillers I used to read when I was a child, because my mother also was a great fan of thrillers, and women were always the victims. They were, for example, chained to the rail tracks, or they were like vampires, this kind of special women that used to be nice, but then they poisoned you. This kind of Italian dramatic characters. But in any case, with these were women with a whole history on their backs. As for me, I wanted to break away from these stereotypes. My female characters are not testosterone. I mean, they are not all the time shooting. They are something more. And women are much more than the stereotypes we can think of. In this sense, I was lucky. I was not lucky to grow up with my father. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, and at some point I thought I was going to become a woman. Of course not. But I started to learn from my grandmother and my mother, since I was raised by them. And I wanted all these lessons to be brought to my novels. Of course, since I tell stories, I imagine that women could explain stories much better than me. And what about you, Pablo? What about your relationship with Silvia Rey, the protagonist of your novel? Yes, she is Silvia Rey. She is the secretary of the prosecutor. She is the second most important position in the prosecutor's office. And, well, this protagonist was not really a personal decision. It was like a manifestation, I mean, a natural appearance. I try to understand female characters from very different points of view, maybe because of the inspiration of my mother, such as Sandrone. But I have to admit that I did not want to create a particular female character. I wanted to create someone who is smart, someone who is sensitive, someone who really aspires to the only way of becoming a hero, which is doing a good job and being committed to doing this good job. My female character wants to do justice, and she understands that being just and fair is her goal in the world. It is a kind of Sisyphus task. It never ends. Yes, she never gives up. When Carrucci gives up, she never gives up. And let me ask you another question, because I'm fascinated by Silvia Rey when she talks about magical thought. She says magical thought is like a strange materialization of human thought. Yes, it is true that the police is more interested in the reality, but Silvia Rey says that we are constantly looking for signs, looking for senses, and the scientific thought is absolutely counterintuitive. It goes against the natural human sense that tries to look for mysticism. And that's the reason why science tries to refuse this. We want to believe in something, but science constantly says, no, this is not true. But Silvia Rey is fascinated by this magic and this mysticism. She likes to be guided by the mystical thought, but at the same time, she faces this mysticism constantly with reality. And Joe, in your novel, apart from women, you also take some position in favor of the LGBTI group. You give information and you say that Brazil is one of the countries where we can see the highest number of problems against LGBTI people. Do you still think that Brazil is the most lethal country for transgender people? You have put a focus on this group. What did you want to tell us?
I mean, to have an opinion right now, I don't have an opinion now. The statistics for when the book was set speak for themselves. So my experience of Brazil was interesting because, on the one hand, Sao Paulo is the most inclusive and welcoming city in the world. A good example is it's the second biggest pride parade outside of Australia, I think. On the other hand, it's run by kind of conservative elites. And so that a lot of the minority groups, whatever whichever one we discuss, are kind of suppressed and find it difficult to live there. I don't think that I particularly... Yeah, my feeling is that addressing the social issues of the country or the city was a question of my experience and seeing very clearly in public discourse that groups were treated badly. And I think that an attempt to understand why or see how that would happen and engage with certain characters that were from the different backgrounds. For me, the key thing is that my novels have multiple characters, multiple narrators, lots of protagonists, lots of people telling the stories. That's why it's so long. There's lots of people's stories in there, and that you need to give every single one of those kind of respect and rigor and time and thought. The key thing is not to ever exploit the story of one of the groups that is suffering at the hands of a structural power, such as Bolsonaro's government, to talk about that specifically. But yeah, I mean, in the novel, in the afterword, I talk about some of those statistics, and they were true then, and now things may have changed, things have changed. I don't have the statistics to hand, but what I wanted to do was kind of paint a picture of that particular time and show that all of these groups were suffering as a result of the structural power of the place, and yet, in other ways, they were able to live and thrive, and that's for me, the question. I'm going to answer that first question again. Why did I love Sao Paulo?
Okay.
I'll go back to that. Because that odd contradiction. How can you have a place that's so conservative and so liberal? You know, the great cities perhaps have that, and that contradiction, that energy makes them fascinating. As I said, I don't have the answers, but if a novel can shine a light on something unjust and suggest there are reasons beyond those specific individuals for them happening, that they might be structural, that there could be things that we engage with as citizens beyond, then that might be a noble thing for a novel to do, possibly.
Thank you. Tenemos 3 minutos.
Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes, and I'd like to ask you a very important question. It is the 1 million question. We are amidst a revolution with AI. Why do you think that behind the novels we will still continue to need writers beyond ChatGPT and AI? Well, I think that there's a paranoia around artificial intelligence, but in reality, AI is seen as a threat because I don't understand it well yet. It's simply a tool that has been made by human beings. It has been created by human beings. It is something that really doesn't concern me at all. And I am sure that if someone has a book in his or her hands written by AI, this person is going to realize that it has been written by a machine, because really we cannot think that a machine is going to create a magical book like that. I'm not worried at all by artificial intelligence. What about you, Joe? Do you think that ChatGPT could lead you to pension?
Some time off. Someone else can do it for me. I mean, I teach creative writing at university in London, and the first work is coming in from AI, and it's so clear that it's not by the students. At the moment, it's not a problem. It's not a worry. You read it and you think, that's not a human. I mean, this is the human factor today, right? So you read that and you go, that's not. It's clear. It's very well written. It has nice turns of phrase, but there's no depth. There's no humanity to the... I'm talking 2,000 words that a 21-year-old produces at university, doesn't produce. So I'm not worried yet. But, you know, how long before you go next? I don't know. I mean, yeah, by the time I've finished writing novels, that's okay, we'll have taken over by then, selfishly. But I'm not worried overall.
No problem. Tú, Sandrone, ¿cómo lo ves?
And what about you, Sandrone? What do you think? Well, I think that it's going to be very interesting to see the evolution of artificial intelligence. Technology has always impacted literature. Of course, computers have also changed the way we write. Now we can move some paragraphs up and down. We can also, for example, change chapters. Before it was much more difficult. And that's why ChatGPT could become an aid. Why not? It could assist us. It's a bit like Google if we want to make search. But of course, in artificial intelligence, we still see a lack of empathy. I mean, mind and soul are not resonating in AI. What we can put as human beings in our novels is our souls. Of course, I agree that some writers will be more technical, others will be less, but I don't think AI is going to replace us. Well, with this very optimistic opinion, I really encourage you to read our 3 writers. I really encourage and invite you to read the novels of our 3 invited guests. Thank you, and BCNegra continues here. Thank you.
So what gives them the right to take your life from you? Why do they all play God? Who said that is your job?